Imagine you're sitting in a cramped, dark room in the middle of the night. The air is thick with smoke and whispered voices. Outside, you hear heavy boots on cobblestone, the city guard making their rounds. Your heart is pounding so hard you can feel it in your throat. But here's the strange part. You haven't stolen anything. You aren't plotting a murder. You haven't broken any law that we would recognize today. Your crime, the thing that could get you dragged into the street and thrown into a dungeon, is far more bizarre. You are simply holding a small steaming cup, and you are drinking coffee. It sounds utterly absurd to us now. Coffee is the most normal thing in the world. It's the background noise of our mornings, the warm, bitter ritual that gets us out of bed. But 400 years ago, this substance was not normal. It was dangerous. It was revolutionary. It was called white gold. It was whispered to be Satan's drink. It was officially banned by kings, sultans, and religious leaders who were absolutely terrified of what might happen if the common people actually stayed awake. Today, we are going to uncover the dark, forgotten history of the bean that changed everything. We're going to explore how a simple plant sparked riots, built global empires, and nearly destroyed the entire social order of the 17th century. This is the story of how your morning cup of coffee was once considered a weapon. Welcome to Object Lore. The story of coffee, like all great and ancient stories, begins shrouded in legend. We have to travel back in time, to somewhere around the 9th century, to the lush, green highlands of Ethiopia. And there, in the mountains, we meet a humble goat herd named Kaldi. Kaldi lived a simple, predictable life. Every morning, he took his goats out to graze. Every evening, he brought them home. But one particular afternoon, something very strange happened. Kaldi noticed that his goats, who were normally calm and sluggish by sunset, were suddenly acting completely unhinged. They were leaping over rocks. They were chasing each other in frantic circles. They were practically dancing. Kaldi, confused and a little alarmed, followed his herd to see what on earth they had gotten into, and he watched them, one by one, chewing on the bright red berries of a bush he had never really paid attention to before. Driven by a mix of curiosity and perhaps a bit of hunger, Kaldi picked a handful of those strange red berries and ate them himself. Within minutes, his exhaustion vanished. His mind felt sharper than it ever had before. He felt a surge of energy that he couldn't explain. He felt alive. Now, whether any of this happened exactly as the legend describes is anyone's guess. Historians debate it, but what we know for certain is that by the 15th century, the coffee plant had crossed the Red Sea and taken root in the terraced mountains of Yemen. And this is where the story of coffee stops being a sleepy local tale and transforms into something much bigger. In Yemen, Sufi monks began using a brewed version of these beans to stay awake during their long, exhausting nights of prayer. They needed to focus their minds for hours on end, and coffee gave them precisely that. But the monks were not the only ones who were about to discover the power of this strange new drink. As coffee spread from Yemen into the wider Middle East, it didn't just become a popular beverage, it became the absolute center of urban life. And that, surprisingly, was exactly the problem. Here's something you have to understand about the pre-coffee world. For centuries, the daily social drink across most of the known world was alcohol. People drank beer or wine throughout the day, partly because it was safer than water, but partly because it was just what you did. And alcohol, as we all know, tends to make people sleepy. It makes them relaxed. It makes them passive. A population that drinks all day is a population that doesn't ask too many difficult questions. But coffee is the chemical opposite of alcohol. Coffee makes people sharp. It makes them talkative. It makes them restless. And most dangerously of all, it makes them critical. When you give a room full of people coffee instead of beer, something radically different starts to happen. They don't drift off into a comfortable haze. They start talking. They start debating. They start questioning the way things are. In cities like Mecca, Cairo, and Istanbul, the coffee house became a phenomenon. It was unlike anything the authorities had ever seen. Men from all walks of life would gather around low tables and argue for hours about philosophy, about science, about politics. They were analyzing the decisions of their leaders. They were criticizing the powerful. They were organizing. And for the ruling class, this was terrifying. A population that is awake and connected is a population that can revolt. So, in the year 1511, the governor of Mecca, a man named Khair Beg, decided he had seen enough. He looked at these buzzing, vibrant coffee houses, and he didn't see culture or community. He saw nests of sedition. He issued a decree. Coffee was officially declared haram, forbidden under Islamic law. Bags of beans were seized and burned in the streets. Coffee houses were boarded up and shuttered, but the governor made a fatal miscalculation. He vastly underestimated how deeply coffee had already woven itself into the fabric of society. The people didn't just give up their coffee and go home, they resisted. The outcry was so immediate and so fierce that the ban was overturned within a matter of months. It was the first great battle over coffee, and the coffee drinkers won. But it would not be the last. When coffee finally arrived in Europe in the early 1600s, it did not receive a warm welcome. It arrived trailing whispers of the East. And for a deeply devout Christian continent, anything that came from the Ottoman Empire was viewed with immediate and deep suspicion. The first European merchants who tried to sell coffee faced a wall of resistance. People called it the bitter invention of Satan. They said it was a heathen drink, a dark and dangerous liquid that would corrupt the soul. The clergy in Rome, in particular, were absolutely outraged. They watched in horror as people began to abandon the traditional midday wine in favor of this strange, black, bitter brew. Wine was safe, they argued. Wine was in the Bible. But this? This was something else entirely. This was a potion designed by the devil himself to seduce Christians away from their faith. A coalition of priests went directly to the Vatican. They stood before Pope Clement VIII, and they made their case. They demanded that he issue a papal decree banning coffee for all Christians forever. This was the make-or-break moment for the future of coffee in the Western world. But Pope Clement VIII was, by all accounts, a deeply curious man. He looked at the priests, he looked at the cup, and he decided that he wasn't going to condemn this drink without first tasting it himself. He summoned a cup of freshly brewed coffee. He lifted it to his lips. He took a sip. Then he took another. The room held its breath, waiting for him to spit it out in disgust, waiting for him to denounce it as the work of the devil. Instead, the Pope smiled. He turned to his advisors, and according to legend, he said something that changed the course of history. He said, "This drink is so delicious that it would be a pity to let the infidels have exclusive use of it. We shall fool Satan by baptizing it." And just like that, coffee was sanctified. It was permitted. It flowed freely across the continent. And Europe would never be the same again. From a banned substance to the fuel of the Enlightenment, that is the arc of coffee's history. The very same drink that was once burned in the streets became the engine behind stock exchanges, newspapers, scientific breakthroughs, and political revolutions. The next time you wrap your hands around a warm mug, don't just think of it as caffeine. Think of it as a historical relic. You are consuming a substance that kings tried to outlaw, that priests called satanic, and that poets called the wine of the mind. What do you think? If you had been alive in 17th century Europe, would you have risked stepping into a coffee house? Or would you have played it safe? Let me know in the comments. If you want more deep dives into the ordinary objects that shaped our world, hit subscribe. This is Object Lore. I'll see you in the next one.